Hello and welcome everybody to another exciting installment of Chapter 2. So this is a series of live streams that I'm running with people I just think are fabulous, admire, and just do amazing work in the world. And, you know, I don't think we're going to get anyone better than Christina Wodtke to sort of come and talk to us today. Christina has written many fabulous books. You can go look at her online. You'll find amazing things, The Team That Managed Itself. But today what we're going to focus on is Radical Focus, which is a book that she originally wrote a number of years ago, primarily around this notion of objective and key results or goal setting. And she's done a fantastic new version of it, or second edition, which I always think, is the second movie going to be better than the first? Well, maybe Terminator 2 was, but I'll tell you what, this book didn't disappoint either. So massive welcome to Christina. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you, Barry, for that wonderful intro. I think of the second edition more like a reboot, like the Charlie's Angels with Drew Barrymore, and Team That Managed Itself as the sequel.
Love it. Yeah. Well, you know, I've been enjoying your work for a number of years. You do so many great things. We were joking before, it's probably easier to say what you don't do rather than what you do, but a fantastic speaker, writer, obviously a lecturer at Stanford now for many years, and do everything from coaching teams to executives and helping a lot of people achieve higher performance, build great products, as well as the number of companies you worked in beforehand. So, you know, one of the fun things I think I always love to kick off this show with is just to give you a chance to sort of share what's the big idea behind Radical Focus? What inspired you to write it, really? And you know, the key sort of capstone or central idea for the book.
Thank you. You know, the thing is that I wrote the first book on objectives and key results. So if you have a horrible experience with OKRs, it might be a little bit my fault, but I would argue you haven't read the book. So, but I could have called it objectives and key results. But what I feel very strongly is that the number one thing that causes entrepreneurs and others to fail at trying to really do extraordinary things is they're all spread too thin. I had left Yahoo right before the great peanut butter manifesto came out. I don't know if you remember that, where one of the GMs wrote about how Yahoo had spread itself too thin over, you know, like more like the Alice in Wonderland quote, I guess, too little butter over too much bread. And I think that that's what I see with startups all the time, right? They're like trying to do 500 things. So I called it Radical Focus. The tool I recommend is objectives and key results. To get that radical focus, I am apparently one of the few people who keep saying, no, you should only have one OKR set. It's not everything you do. It's the thing you're afraid to do. So the really big idea is if there's something incredibly important you need to do, you've got to make it part of your daily rhythm. And you've got to be really clear on what are the outcomes you want to see, make sure everybody's aware of those outcomes, and then repeat them until you're blue in the face, to be quite honest. And I've got to say that the people who follow this technique are extremely happy with the results that they see.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. And look, we already have questions coming in. Love it. Keep adding the questions. We'll get to as many as we can. You know, one of the, there's so many great, like, I went through the book and was like highlighting the hell out of it, right? And this is one that really jumped out at me. It's not important to protect an idea. It's important to protect the time it takes to make it real. And that just made me go, hell yeah. And it sort of aligns a little bit about what you were saying, right? Often, I think when, you know, I've experienced trying to set OKRs, and they're such like a, you know, so hot right now type topic in the industry, right? Everyone's doing OKRs. But I see such variability in the quality of the ones that are written, in the amount that people apply to their company. You know, what are some of the sort of guide rails that you would sort of recommend to people as whether they've been practicing this for years or they're getting started with it? Because I'm already hearing that you're saying like limiting them is actually really, really important for them to be successful.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that making things complicated seems to be an urge all human beings seem to have. And so I always say that OKRs are like the advice, eat less and exercise more. It's very, very simple and it's very, very hard, right? But Absolutely. It's really about committing to that. Yeah, right. So it's about committing to that simplicity. So you have tons and tons of metrics that you collect. I mean, assuming that you've instrumented your site or your product or whatnot. And most of them you can ignore unless there's a disaster. And then you have all these metrics that you want to review on a regular basis, right? Which are KPIs, if you want to call them that. And then there's a small set of what I call them health metrics, and they're sort of canary in the coal mine metrics. And you just want to look at those, but you want to look at those often, like multiple times a week, and say, okay, is everything on fire? And it can be everything from team health to customer satisfaction, something that you want to take a pulse on. But then on top of all these approaches that you're using to understand your business, you put one OKR set, and that is the strategic initiative that you want to focus on for this quarter or this year that you are afraid that life's crazy will keep you from achieving, right? And that's why you have just one, because the reality is our life is full of things we're measuring. Our life is full of things that we're trying to do. But how do we make sure that that doesn't overwhelm something that's really, really critical? And I think in this last year and a half of the pandemic, gosh, almost 2 years, I think the only thing that kept me sane was I run my life on OKRs. Like I was able to get a new book out and get things done, right? And it's just that little guide rail that keeps you moving forward, even when everything's falling apart.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that just leapt out at me as I was reading the second edition is that you have just packed it with examples, and I think it's one of the things when people, and we even see the questions here from Michael and Ashmeet, they're already asking for these ideas of how do I manage the difference between output OKRs and outcome OKRs? Another thing that sounds super easy, but again, super hard. And just getting people on board, right, to understand the different types of OKRs you might want to write and at different levels. So what's probably one of your favorite examples that you would share with people as they're starting to do this to help them really zero in on that sort of one item that they might look at for the quarter, and then how they can start to hang other activities off that?
Oh my gosh, you just put like 50 questions in one question. You're very clever, Barry.
I'm trying to pack it in. It's a compact show. We got to keep it intensity high.
Well, so the first thing I would say is it is really important to try to make outcomes. And the reason is because one of the things the OKRs allow you to do is empower your team. And Marty Kagan, of course, wrote the recent wonderful book, Empowered. And so if you tell people the results you want to see and trust them, and that does assume you hired well, you should be able to let them figure out what should they be doing to make this happen. I apologize. My puppy's here and she's very excited to be here.
All right. Dogs and babies are always welcome on this show. It's all good.
Excellent. So what happens is we're solvers, man. You and me, we make things, we come up with projects, we like to fix things. We're like, as soon as we hear a problem, we're like, I know what to do. And you have to stop that instinct a little bit and say, okay, why is this thing popping to mind? So I teach my clients to workshop each other's OKRs. So they'll be like, okay, we really want to do this new, we're gonna do TikTok. And I'm like, okay, well, what are you hoping to get with TikTok? What are the results you want? Oh, well, we think it's going to let us reach this new group of Generation Y. And so, okay, well, there's your objective. We want to connect with Generation Y. So by asking, why do you think that's a good idea? And then you can say, how do you know? That's my next favorite question. So, okay, we're going to try to reach the Generation Y. Well, what do you mean by reach? What's some numbers that would say you were actually having an impact? You were touching them. And then you have an OKR set. So it's almost like a habit that you build. And it's much easier to do it with someone else. Just like having an exercise partner is going to make it more likely you get to the gym. Having a thinking partner for OKRs makes a world of difference. One of the cool things I've been doing with a bunch of my clients over the last few years is, how people think of doing cascading, where, your boss has to check your OKRs and see if they're okay. Takes forever, slows the whole company down. Suddenly you're a company that does OKRs as opposed to a company that makes profit. I mean, it's crazy talk. So instead, my clients have been doing peer review. So you write your OKR, you just have a couple of people look at it that understand what you're up to well enough to give you a comment, and then you're done. And so, and that also creates and higher psychological safety. You don't feel like you're being approved of. Instead, you're just having somebody, you know, check your back and make sure you got it. So much better. So much better.
Yeah, no, this really, really resonates as well. I think, and again, it was one of the things that was super helpful in the book, right? Like seeing lots of examples, it's a great thing to compare and contrast against. It's like, oh, somebody has maybe got a people problem and this is the way they're describing it, or somebody has a process focus and that's the way they're describing it, or, oh, I'm trying to reach a new customer segment or market, that's how they're describing it. I think there's so much value in just seeing all these different examples. And I love this notion of the sort of peer group. You know, the thing that's sort of top of mind, and, you know, another one of my sneaky motives to get you on the show is at Nobody Studios, when we're a venture studio building these 100 companies over the next 5 years, right? And a lot of the startup teams and founders are really trying to embrace OKRs as a way of setting their goals, objectives as they're starting these companies. So hello to all the nobodies out there. And I know you're going to put loads of questions in for Christina as well. She's waving. So, you know, give us a little bit of advice. What for those founders as they're starting, and I'm going to totally, absolutely steal getting them to do peer reviews with each other. So there's one we're already going to do. But what are some like little tidbits you could give the founders and the teams as they're starting off in the companies themselves? And then even advice you could give maybe for myself or the rest of the team in the studio as we're trying to help all these companies in the portfolio be successful. What are some of the things we should be looking out for, or more importantly, not be doing to get in the way of those teams being successful?
I think my top one's going to be simplify. There's this weird trend. I don't know who set it off, and I've seen it most commonly in the last year, maybe 2 years, where people are OKRing everything. Like they have so many OKRs. It feels like every single thing they do has an OKR in it. And, you know, I teach, as you mentioned, at Stanford, and that means I spend a lot of time studying learning science, and working memory is incredibly limited. So when you have this many OKRs, people can't hold that in their brain. But when you only have one, anytime you have 5 minutes on a Friday or 2 hours on a Thursday, you're like, oh, well, I know what the most important thing is for the company to be successful. I will put my time there. Or if you're being asked for 15 different requests, like engineering or design is, you can be like, I know what the most important thing is for the company. I know whose request I need to prioritize, right? So the simpler you are, the more effective they're going to be. And with founders, oh my gosh, they're the worst. They're like shiny object syndrome, like squirrel. And I know I've been a founder. I totally get it. But you need that that touchstone. That it's almost like a mantra for the quarter. It's like, this quarter, we're really figuring out what? Acquisition. And if you're not product market fit, your only OKRs get to product market fit. Like, don't even worry about it. Now, maybe if you have a hypothesis where you're like, ooh, this looks like it could be product market fit, you could make an OKR that said, you know, delight customers with our dog bark removing tonic, and delight is decided by this many acquisitions, this many conversions, this much reuse, you know, some numbers that are basic numbers that you're going to turn to. And then you could work your asses off to make that true. But at the end of that quarter, you'd have to ask yourself, oh, it didn't happen. Are we wrong about product market fit? Do we suck? You know, you have to ask yourself the hard questions. What I love about OKRs for startups, and I haven't written about this, but I think one of the hardest things for a startup is to know when to stop, because you get some signal and you're so hopeful. You're like, oh, but somebody just said they really loved it and we just got 5 more people. Like, how do you know when to actually quit? And the formality of going, okay, success will look like these numbers, and if these numbers don't move, we're going to pivot or quit. That's invaluable. It's sanity saving. It's credit card saving. There's so many reasons to do it.
Yeah, it's such great advice. You know, I think, I often find with the teams is the ones that can, quit ideas early, mean that they have more time to focus on whatever they've learned and do something different, right? I think when you persist down the path because you're hoping it's going to work, that's where I think you can, burn your runway and you're gone. And the best teams, I feel like, have almost like a pile of ideas that they tried and didn't work and were able to move on from quickly, rather than the team who had one idea and just kept at it, and then magically it just worked one day. I think think there's a lot to be said there. So we've some really great questions. I want to give, they're coming in from LinkedIn, from all the different platforms. So it's always fun to sort of dive into one of these. So one of the questions I'd love to talk a little bit, because it's a bit around this notion of maybe associated with startups, but enterprises are building new products. What are your suggestions for good innovation accounting or learning velocity OKRs from teams that are just starting out? And that's from Michael Goldstein.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think you should have Janice Fraser on the show if you haven't, because she is the goddess of innovation accounting. Like, she just, like, I've learned so much from her. So I would definitely say that's a place for it. I'm not sure if I fully understand the question, but I will say that my understanding is that learning velocity is a very attractive term for me, because one thing I think is the single highest value of OKRs is what they do for learning. I think that they increase the speed of learning tremendously because of the cadence, because you've got this clear goal, you're constantly through your priorities, your P1s, you're constantly attempting to make that number move. You're learning, in Edison's word, 1,000 ideas that don't work, but then you learn those things that do work. And because you have the Friday bragging sessions, which I really hope you have, then you're also learning from other folks what's working. So you're increasing the learning velocity of the entire company through OKRs. Now, how to measure that? Gosh, I think measuring learning velocity might be a teaching a pig how to sing situation, if you know what I'm saying.
What I love about what you've already shared, and I imagine some people might not actually be aware of, because it's I think it's actually really key to this learning velocity idea, is the Friday bragging session. So just elaborate a little bit on what that is for folks, because they mightn't be familiar with that technique, and I think it's sort of key to this one.
Oh my gosh. So one of the shocking things for me from the first edition, learning from that, was how much more important the cadence is than the quality of the OKR. So you can set a poor OKR, but if you are doing the cadence, so the cadence is on Monday, you commit, you say, here are the things I say I'm going to do to make these OKRs move, right? You don't say, oh, here's 15 things I'm doing. No, you just go, here's the big things I'm doing to make the OKRs move. And hopefully, if you have productive conflict and psychological safety, the other people in the group will say, why are you doing that? That's not going to work, or whatever, But okay, so you commit to this thing. And then on the Friday, you brag about the wins. So the problem with OKRs is they are always stretch goals. And by the way, no, you do not get the whole what is it called? Committed and aspirational. No, just too messy, complicated. No, just set a stretch goal. It could be a yoga stretch, nice and gentle. It could be a big moonshot stretch if you're into that. But no, none of this committed stuff. That suggests you don't have psychological safety, and you're probably compensating based on OKRs. And those are all things that are going to destroy your company's ability to do amazing things. Wow, there's a whole other book there. I'll move on. Dang. So on Fridays, because they're stretch goals, it can be depressing to not make them. So on Friday, you set aside time to brag about what you've accomplished. And that keeps the morale high. It lets you appreciate your fellow workers. You go, oh, that dude in the corner, I never knew what he did, but look, he does something important. That's kind of awesome. So you get to know each other. It's a beautiful thing. I've had clients who are wanted to do OKRs, and since it was the middle of the quarter, all they did first was put in the Friday bragging session, and they said, oh my gosh, the company's just already better. We're happier. We're getting more done. People are excited to have things to brag about. So I'd say if there's one thing you should start with the Friday bragging session. It's really, really good. And people are doing it on Slack now. We're like, it's okay. It's not bad. It's not as awesome as getting in a circle and eating a bunch of pizza and talking face to face, but Slack's kind of okay.
Yeah, it's amazing when people talk to each other, what can happen, hey? I love it. It's such a great technique, though. Really, really good. And it sort of goes to one other question we have from Ashmeet, which is, often the response that maybe she's experiencing, I'm sure I've heard and seen this, many people experience this, is this is just paperwork, like why am I filling out these forms? Or I write the OKRs at the start of the quarter and they go up on the wall in a nice plaque, and then we all get back to doing what the CEO tells us to do next week when they see a shiny object. So what are some of the techniques, and I think you've already alluded to one or two of them here already, that you would help the team just to keep them alive, like keep them living, keep them as a constant? You've mentioned the cadence being so important.
Wow. I have to say that question just broke my heart a little bit. You got to give me a second to recover from the sadness, because that's just OKR theater. And they probably have design thinking theater and all sorts of other stupid theater activities that aren't real, that are wasteful. My gosh, OKRs and a plaque. Really? I know that design teams love making posters of things like your OKRs, your poster or your personas, but they disappear within like under a week. You stop seeing them. So no, you have to have a living practice. So if my CEO was like, oh, this is what I think we should do right now, I'd be like, okay, well, this is our OKR. Is it more important? Is it worth disrupting our OKR? How is it going to feed into the OKR? But again, it sounds like there's no psychological safety there. And if your company isn't a place where you can challenge the leaders or even just ask them questions, it's probably just, I hate to say this, ignore them, ignore the OKRs. Just try to, within your team, set your own goals that the team has agreed on, and do your best to have somebody be, I think Google refers to their PMs as shit umbrellas. I hope that was okay that I cussed.
Yeah, absolutely. We love the shit umbrella here. That's what it's all about. Looking after the teams, keeping them safe.
Excellent. So, somebody on the team needs to be the shit umbrella. You can rotate the position if you want. That'll be the person who tells the CEO, yes, we'll look into it. We'll get back to you. And by next week, he'll come up with something else. Or whatever the appropriate approach is. But within your team, like set an OKR that the team can believe in, work towards it, do what you can, make it your own. But I don't understand why so many companies resort to these incredibly backwards, Tayloristic management practices that have been disproved extensively in the literature. Extensively. And yet people keep doing these stupid things of like thinking management means telling people what to do. It makes me crazy. I mean, I wrote the team that managed itself because I was having all these conversations after Radical Focus of people like, how do I do a performance review? And I'm like, how do you do it already? And they'd be like, well, I just wanted to ask you how you did it. And I'm like, I see. Okay. So yeah, management it's a skill.
Yeah, no, I love it. And one of the OKR platforms that I am advisor to is just 3 things, and one of the things we constantly see in that platform is that the teams that are engaging with the OKR, lots of discussion, lots of what we're learning, capturing, sharing, especially in this remote world, they're the ones that perform better again and again and again. And the ones who write it once, send it to the manager, and update it 5 minutes before the reporting is due, they're not alive, right? And their sort of signal and behavior, as you say, that are not necessarily the way they're going to help you be successful. So let's switch gears a little bit again to what you're doing now at the moment. Like, you're doing some really fascinating stuff in terms of how you're running your business as well, right? You started to flip a lot more into, maybe less doing these workshops, but actually really targeted coaching with executives and leaders that, they may have started off as OKRs, but that, I often think OKR is a tool, but it's actually a culture shift, and you're really experiencing that. So could you share a little bit of an insight of some of the things you're doing now and, how that's sort of changed your thinking?
It's been really fascinating because as I was saying earlier, I was doing these trainings. I'd dive bomb in for, whatever, 4 hours, 8 hours, depending on whether it was remote or in person. Hasn't been in person in a while. And I just got sad because I felt like it didn't make the impact I wanted it to. And I've heard this from other trainers, and I think that you can only do so much with a 1 day or a 2 day workshop. I mean, it's nice to get people excited by the ideas, and, it's nice if people will read the book as well. But I decided that I would try an experiment. You know, I'm a lean startup person, much like yourself. And so I'm like, okay, I have a hypothesis, which is coaching will allow me to make more lasting change and create more meaning. And so the way I'm testing it this quarter is I've taken on just a tiny handful of coaching clients, because I do work full-time at Stanford. And I'm meeting with them once a week, and we're talking through whatever they're struggling with. And I think what's interesting is they may have reached out to me because of OKRs, but that's not what we talk about. Most of what we end up talking about is really people management issues, figuring out how to manage people, especially when you have a bunch of them, you know, and they start getting large numbers of them, is really, really hard. And most people don't know how to go into a difficult conversation with somebody whose work is not meeting their needs, and helping scaffold people through that. And what really breaks my heart, Barry, is that there are people who have been sitting there doing a bad job for a long time. Their manager has mentioned it once or twice, but not really let them know how important it is or what the consequences of getting it wrong is. And then suddenly it's too late. The manager's given up on them. It's all toxic, and they just want to fire them. And it's such a waste. I mean, it takes so long to hire people.
So long, so much energy.
Oh my gosh, it breaks my heart. So I'm like, okay, well, let me scaffold you through this. Like, okay, here's how you do your first conversation about the unwanted behavior. Here's how you make sure they understand that it actually matters. Here's how you make it even more real. Here's how you pip them and put them at, you know, let them go. And I always consider it a giant win when somebody gets saved. And I don't think we have the right attitude. Like you see on the Twitters and news and everything, everybody's going, it's a huge talent shortage. And yet we're still treating people as if they're disposable and easily replaced. And I don't buy it. Like, do you really want to hire someone right now for any role? Gosh, what a nightmare.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm living this at the moment every day. But, you know, and this is you work so hard to find great people. And then the worst thing you can do is put them into these Tayloristic management systems. So you take away all their talent, or, you know, you don't give them the chance to express themselves, as you're alluding to. And I think it's super important. So before I ask you the sort of last question on radical focus and the special magic about how people can really get started with it, or your sort of secret tip. The one thing, obviously, Christina and I absolutely love is feedback, right? We want to know a little bit, like, what did you love about this show? What was fun about it? What would you want to hear more of? And the power of this feedback mechanism is you just take out this little device that follows you around in your home. And if you scan it and you can find a dinosaur somewhere on the screen and click the dinosaur, an amazing little form is going to pop up that's going to ask you 3 questions. And you only have to answer 1 at a minimum. But if you answer 3, there could be a prize. So see if you can find that little dinosaur and scan it, and do share some feedback with Christina and I. So Christina, in closing then, so, you know, if somebody was going to go out there, you know, spend the time to read Radical Focus, I think it's a great investment of time. The book is like it's the perfect length. It's almost like Goldilocks. It's not too long. It's not too short. It's just right in the middle. You know, what would be one thing you'd love readers to take away with, or something you think is really going to help them move forward after reading the book?
I think I would say try it at home. I think nothing teaches you more about OKRs than actually using them. And so I think if you thought about something in your own life that you've been meaning to work on, maybe it's exercise, maybe it's the Great American Novel, and try shaping an OKR for it, and then find a buddy and send them your number 1 priorities towards that OKR each week, and have your buddy send it back to you. Or even ask your buddy if they'll just read it and say, thanks. Or on Tuesday, hey, I didn't get your priorities this week. I've done it with my coach for 6 years now, as well as 2 accountability groups where I'm supporting other women entrepreneurs who are using OKRs. And that habit teaches you so much about OKRs, what it takes to do them, but it also teaches you a lot about yourself. What are the things that get in your way? Like, I've learned so much about the fact that I tend to give up health and well-being practices the instant work needs me. And I learned that by going, wow, I keep not getting things accomplished. What did I do? Oh, that's information. So the same thing that works great for a startup, which is learning all the ways you get in your own damn way, works for yourself. So I'd say before you bring it to your company, maybe give yourself a month or a quarter even of doing it for yourself and see how it feels. Get a sense of what it's like. But if you're going to do it as a company, one. You can have 2 next quarter, maybe.
Sage advice as ever, Christina. So again, thank you very much for spending time with us on the show, dropping loads of knowledge. It's always a pleasure. Don't forget to find that dinosaur and give us some feedback, folks. Any questions in the comments, I'm sure Christina and I will respond to you over time. Again, Christina, thank you very much for sharing. It's more great books. I hopefully there's more to come in the future. I'm sure there are. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you tweet me questions, weirdly enough, I often answer them. I go to Twitter when I'm procrastinating, and I am working on a book, so I'm procrastinating a lot. So bring me your questions.
I love it. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for all the questions online, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you in the next show soon.
Bye. Thank you.